Hey everyone, it's Sunday the 7th of June. Um, it's the day of the Black Lives Matter march in the city of Hamilton, Bermuda, and I needed to make a video for a couple of reasons. One is to show my support. I won't be attending, nor my wife, because my wife has a compromised immune system, and so does my father, and I do not want to take the chance of infecting them or spreading it to my team at work. So I'm nervous about taking part in that march, um, but I'm there in spirit and in mind. I fully support Black Lives Matter movement in the U.S., and I think the injustices of what's going on in the U.S. Need to be corrected, as always. But yeah, I cannot support. After 3 months of lockdown, I do not want to jeopardize the compromised health of my wife or my family to attend the rally. So I'm showing my support here um, for the movement. Anyway, so that leads me to my next comment or feedback on what's going on in Bermuda and in the US and how they're interconnected in many ways. Um, like everybody else, we've been following what's happening in the US with the police brutality and senseless killings of Black Americans in the hands of a few bad cops, and a system that seems to not want to fix that problem. And I think that um, this has been years in the making, this movement, and it is the perfect storm in many ways to get to this point, and it's the right way to go. But the one thing I am concerned about is the risk of having identity politics um, create a disconnect with the left liberal movement that are trying to displace the main reason that America is going through this problem. I think it's pretty clear to see that having the current occupant in place is has galvanized a movement of alt-right Nazism, white supremacy of the United States. It's pretty clear that they use him as their scapegoat to do things in the United States, and that is has always been there. It's never really gone away. Civil war really has never left the United States mindset, um, and the left liberalist ideology is not something that a lot of Americans in various places respect, and that's a shame. I think that as an anti-theist, evolutionist, realist myself, um, I understand the concept of who we are as humanity and as sentient beings, and I understand that although there is no real purpose to life on this planet as an evolutionist, as a rock in the middle of a billion different um, galaxies around us, we're essentially um, having to figure things out on our own. And anyway, I won't go too deep into that. But the the main concern I have is ensuring that we don't uh, take identity politics to the point where the momentum either fades away or it disconnects all of the movements that have really been galvanized over the last 3.5 years of this presidency and this administration, from the Women's March to the um, LGBTQ community to every other form of resistance to this administration that have been fighting daily to expose the divisiveness, the misinformation, the agenda being played out to distance ourselves from allies and environmental concerns and equality issues and anyway, identity politics is a dangerous tool that the GOP know that they can use now to try to break pieces off of a galvanized movement so that there's less impact at the polls. And that's a big problem. I think that we need to be very careful not to make the mistake of prejudicially stereotyping entire cultures and colors of people um, when movements like this come along. Um, we all need to understand that hundreds of millions, if not billions, of people around the world, and that's my belief, that out of the close to 7 billion people in the world right now, the majority of most, I think, want to be able or are fighting against this pandemic of the mind, where we need to um, hopefully get back to a position of uh, global community. Globalization has always been around. Globalization has been around for centuries. We are a global nation. Closing our borders off and raising hype to try and create a nationalist, separatist ideology will never work. It will never work for the betterment of humanity long term. I think we all know that. And the alternate side is that why would you want it to? What fucking point does that prove when you ask yourself that question? Unless you have a Bible next to you that's preaching your lifestyle and that's the only lifestyle you can follow, then I feel sorry for you, really. I feel sorry for your inability to look beyond just that one set of scripture. And anyway, so that would be my beef, is just being very careful that we don't run down the road of um, creating an identity politics issue that disenfranchises us from ourselves and keeps this current administration in play for 4 more years. Because I think if that happens, you as Americans and us as dependents around the world on a global economy will ultimately suffer the consequences, and um, I don't think the future would be very bright. So, um, making sure we don't use and abuse the word. This may sound very simplistic, but this has always been an issue for me. Racism in general is a belief system that certain colors or cultures of people feel that other cultures, classes, or colors are of unequal standing within humanity. Where some whites believe that blacks are inferior and need to be positioned in a place below a hierarchy, financially, socially, environmentally. Um, you see it in Asia with its class systems. You see it in South America. It's all over the world. The Middle East. This isn't just a unique situation, racism. This is a global pandemic of personal belief that people are of unequal stature. And again, as an evolutionist, it would be impossible for me to believe that. And I think that fortunately, most Bermudians don't believe that either. I think that there are prejudices, there are prejudice um, perspectives that are being played out. They have no choice. I think that um, without jumping back to Bermuda too quickly, I'd rather just finish off on America and just how it eventually connects to Bermuda. Uh, I just really wish America, hope America does not go down the road of creating a situation where they disenfranchise or disconnect from the main movement of all of those groups to work together to displace, because it's not going to be easy. The GOP and the right-wing agenda is predominantly the top 1%. They control the financial scenario within the United States and the global economy. So it's going to be twice as hard to fight them long term. And that's why generally the Democrats get in for a short period of time. They rebalance the ship, they work their asses off to fix things, and then a little bit of divisiveness comes in and it tears apart an organization as it did after Obama. And look what happened. Um, a little bit of false information, misinformation gets spread, and everybody just stops voting. And that is not a good thing. That's obviously been proven to be a very detrimental thing to society. So I think we need to be very careful not to um, misuse words like racism. Um, Racism has a very serious historical meaning to it. And although there are racists that exist in the world that believe that certain humans, certain cultures are meant to be disenfranchised or displaced or positioned in a place below others, is they do exist. I think that their numbers are small. I think that that racism has been replaced with pure prejudice, which has been perpetuated by many who just go too far to the left in some ways. You can see it with many different things. Not something to get into here, but I'd love to get into it more. But identity politics is something we need to watch out for, and we need to stop prejudicially stereotyping entire cultures and colors of people with that brush. Not only does it give cover to true racists that are now galvanizing and hiding amongst everyone who is being classed as being part of a racist society or being a racist themselves, um, but it also gives people who have been fighting for years to be a part of or to create a just society for all in whatever way they can, whether it be doing a video like this or writing against someone who has an ignorant ideology online, even something simple like that. Um, Starting movements, starting charities, starting organizations. You know, I know a lot of people who do that every single day, and within their heart of hearts, they are good people. Um, so the American thing, um, fully in support of ensuring that the Black Lives Matter movement is sustained and they correct um, this policy within the police forces in the United States that are creating this situation. It's scary to see. What's even scarier is seeing the movement to send military in and the way that they kind of reacted to that. That's trouble. But essentially, making sure that when we're using words like racist and racism, we understand the true meaning of it and we don't label people who aren't with that brush, because not only is it counterproductive, it also puts those people's lives in jeopardy. It puts those people's positions in jeopardy to effect change. It also unfairly labels them and puts them in a group of people that they should not be put into. Um, Being prejudiced is a different thing. Being prejudiced is something that you can feel as though you have no choice to be a part of. And I know some people who have joined those ranks and decided that prejudice is going to be a part of them because they feel that prejudice is being imposed on them. And that's where the shift from America to Bermuda becomes more important, because I think we have a very unique situation here in Bermuda where um, Bermuda is a 21 square mile island. It's a slit of a rock, the top of a volcano in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, that for 400 years has battled um, to rid itself of the stain of slavery, um, which was which infected the island and infected the world. And we we have a situation here in Bermuda where it's unique in a way where we have a movement that was very much an MLK movement to correct that, in which everyone is wanting to be a part of and to fix it. And we seemingly, I'm 49 years old, we seemingly, for most of my life, have seen a party that has rejected or at least pushed aside the momentum of an MLK um, concept of the world of equality, where we all try to solve these problems together, to now a movement that has thrown that ideology and that concept in the bin and replaced it with a um, a very similar prejudice movement that was in the island years ago, where there wasn't a desire any longer to try to work together to solve these problems, and it was either too slow or not working for whatever reason, and power needed to be taken. And out of the 49 years, I would say a good solid 25 of them have been in one way or another fighting for this argument to be exposed and to be this debate to be had, because I don't think that dropping the ball on trying to work together is the way to go. I think that trying to um, prejudicially stereotype an entire culture of color and color people in Bermuda is also not the way to go. I think that we've been lucky enough as a small island to be able to see the effects of past prejudice and racism and how it played into the slavery concept of Bermuda and around the world. And myself being brought up in a black community within a black public school system um, gave me a unique opportunity and a privilege to see that firsthand. And I grew up with a lot of friends who I know now to have lived through that exact same thing, and still live through it and still question every day, when is the divisiveness going to stop? When is the actual movement to galvanize people to fix these problems going to happen? Because I think there's nothing that people want more than to try and figure those problems out. Um, I don't know why um, there seems to be a desire to want to deepen the divide to the point where we've dug a hole so deep that we simply can't get out of, which unfortunately with the COVID crisis now hitting us, I think we are kind of, if not at that bottom. I don't know what will take it. Shooting in the streets may be it, or a full racial riot here in Bermuda would do it. I don't see that being brought on um, by opposers of the PLP, and I wouldn't say white Bermudians, because I think a lot of black Bermudians within the community are opposing of the divisiveness as well. So yeah, I see a problem where Bermuda is has used and is using today the word racism and racist to perpetuate a never-ending divide amongst its own people. And that's not a sustainable approach to take. As I said, I'm an anti-theist, atheist, evolutionist, believer in science, believer in the understanding of life in general, and I believing in racism or being a racist is a sick disease. It's an inability to understand the truth about humanity, and racism is not something that I think is what most Bermudians are in any way, shape, or form. Anybody who believes that a black Bermudian or an Asian or a Mexican or whatever is of a lesser stature within society um, is and believes that that person needs to be placed in a position of um, inequality to others is has a mental disorder that's not able to grasp reality. And although I think that still does exist, I think that prejudice has taken the place of that in many ways. And there's a huge difference between a prejudiced point of view and a racist person, someone who believes in racism. Um, so I think we need to be very careful not to continue to deepen this divide, um, only because I don't think we're in a position as such a small place to be able to handle too much more of it. Um, there's no real need to dismantle an entire um, society to build one that has absolute equality. Um, I think certain people want different things. I think there's some that want full revenge, um, some that want full redemption, some that want full reparations. And the latter, I think we need to have that conversation. We need to. What is it? What does it look like? I think that I have my ideas of how that could easily work in Bermuda, and without tearing down one culture to prop up another. I think we need to look at the varying levels of wealth in the community and kind of say, wait a second, there isn't a sustained level of wealth that is perpetuating a black inequality. I think that we need to be realistic with where we are with things and understand that there are there are people within the white community that aren't well off, that aren't in a position to be labeled as privileged in a lot of ways. Um, and there's varying levels of those things that we need to discuss. Um, I'm absolutely of the belief that we can fix the problems of inequality in Bermuda, but we just need to start. And I think that's the biggest thing is starting it and creating a movement where we ensure that politicians aren't preachers or prophets. We need to create movements that protect people from politicians. Um, and we put politicians back in positions of what they are hired to do. They're essentially hired to run the country. Um, as a business owner, I have an accountant, I have an office manager, I have project coordinator, I have technicians. As far as I'm concerned, governments need to be run the same way, and the public need to have strong grassroots um, organizations similar to ombudsman style policing of politicians to make sure there's no corruption, there's no misinformation, there's no divisiveness, there's no purposeful intent to take a party politic position on things and to create a situation where Bermuda's got to be us or them. There's no point in that. First of all, we're too small. Um, and what would be the end goal? Is the end goal just to eradicate one culture so that another can succeed? And if that's the case, what the hell's the difference between that ideology and the ideology that we're all seemingly fighting against in the first place? I think that's the hardest part, is having to look now on a situation where, knowing the past problems we faced with segregation, racism, prejudice, inequality, only to now see a movement that in some ways you can't avoid the fact that it seems as though they're trying to recreate that or reincarnate that type of resistance where um, you almost say, well, an eye for an eye is where we are, and that's where we're going to stay. Um, I've got hundreds of posts where I've battled for over 25 years, 20 years at least, um, of people where a simple conversation goes completely off the rails because there's no um, there's no point beyond a certain point that it can be discussed, and that's either because it's coming from the mouth of someone not in the same culture, and you're not afforded the right to do that, which is a form of identity politics and a form of wanting to house um, that situation just within themselves. And I it's very ugly to see what is taking place in Bermuda and what has taken place over the last 20 years. I think we're losing a massive opportunity to work together to make a very unique situation within our own country. Um, we've certainly hit rock bottom. We've certainly been through enough to for us to be affected financially before the pandemic. And I think we are going to only see even more of those effects now, tenfold. And it scares me to think about how the government are going to address these. Um, if I haven't mentioned it already, I support the PLP's movement uh, to the way they worked with the COVID-19 crisis. I think it could have been done 2 weeks sooner. I think, unfortunately, we followed the lead of the our from America, and we waited a little too long. And that's really not the fault of the party. I think that we were all duped by an idiot running the most powerful country in the world, and that country seeing the effects of that. But at the same time, as much as I agree that the shutdown was handled well and has been handled well to date. Um, I don't think we had a whole lot of choice in that matter. I think we had to do it, and I think that people were scared enough to realize that we could see what was coming. The tidal wave was coming, and we had to hunker down and shut up and just pay attention. And so I applaud you for that as a government, but I really hope you come out the other end of this with a different mindset toward cohesive movements and not perpetuating the same divisive ideology that you seemingly wanted to do for so long. I think that's over. I think we need to come out with a different frame of mind and understand that, in my view, a vast majority of Bermudians of my era and other, younger and older, are good people who are wanting to fix these problems and move ahead together for no other choice than because we have to. We have no choice. A lot of Bermudians, white, black, and other, have been fighting for justice in whatever form we can. Like I said, either through a simple comment or conversation with a friend or foe, or whatever they've done to fix it. Not everybody can be an MLK or a JFK and stand up and preach to galvanize thousands or millions of people. They can do their small bit to ensure that if they see an issue, they can stop it. So I think moving forward, I hope Bermuda can make more movement in the direction of actually fixing the problems we have, and then also discussing openly what a 100-year plan in Bermuda looks like. Where do we want to be as a future for 100 to 500 years? Not to say we need to make policies that last for 100 years, but what do we want to be as a country in 100 years' time? What direction do we want to head in so in 100 years' time we're better humans, we have a safer society, a cleaner environment, and a more sustainable approach to how we succeed. And I would much prefer to see a galvanized community working together to make that happen than a fractured one fighting um, to create their own agendas. You know, I just don't think that's practical. It's stupidity coming from someone who, again, is an evolutionist, an anti-theist, and someone who has a lot to say about a lot of things, as I'm sure a lot of Bermudians do. And I hope that we can all take 30 seconds, a minute, an hour, whatever your time, to voice your concerns, voice your comments, get out there and speak. Just speak, because that in and of itself is part of solving this problem that Bermuda and the world are facing in general, with a divisive ideology towards politics. Um, and we need to stop that. I think that unfortunately, a lot of what's happened in Bermuda over the last 20 to 25 years, 30 years maybe, has been what we're seeing in the States now is a major push to divide and isolate an identity within the politics of people, to have a movement that does not involve inclusiveness and unity and a sustainable future for all. And I think we're seeing it in the States now on steroids, and we see the results of how that happens on a major scale. It's completely crippled the United States in many ways, and yeah, I think it's high time that we banded together to um, say enough is enough and to resist that type of movement, and to work together to try and do what we can to fix it. Um, but don't don't separate people based on the color of their skin anymore. Don't overgeneralize or prejudicially stereotype entire cultures and colors of people. All it does is it weakens the momentum of the movement, and it isolates people and jeopardizes people and creates resentment, resistance, prejudice in people that aren't necessarily able to capture or sustain a level of commitment because there is a seeming resistance to understanding that these people are doing what they can. Okay. So I would applaud people to please be careful using words and terms like racist and racism. They have meaning. There are racist people out there today that are again taking cover, because that label is being used in a way that is broad brushed, and those racists are just hiding under the cover and creating these movements, and that's not the way to go. That's not the way this is going to work. By doing that, we need to be conscious about ensuring that whenever we use a culture or color of people um, to label, we don't label them collectively. I never do that. Saying that blacks are genocidal because the Tutsis and the Hutus in Rwanda had a genocidal war would mean that all blacks are genocidal. We don't do that. We don't say, like Trump has said, Muslims are X, or Mexicans are X, or, you know, that's the exact same thing as what is happening now by using the word white. And again, this isn't a care about the emotional impact on me personally. This is the deeper seated comparison between exactly what Trump is doing, as labeling an entire culture of people, to what the movement is doing on the left with a too woke perception of how they need to attack this issue. Um, you know, anyway, that's my vent, and I hope we can work this out together, and much more to talk about when we start getting down to plans on how we can move together as a country and how we can fix the problems in Bermuda together. Anyway, Black Lives Matter. I support you in spirit. I'm not there today, but I support you, and I support any issue that tries to um, balance the scales of equality um, as best they can, and I'm there with you. So, peace, happy Sunday, and take care. Bye.